Anyway, so I'm on my own. The worst thing of it all is that I've been trapped into this weird series of circumstances into agreeing to some sort of Zoom call with Henry. I've got to go. I think the Tonto's finally arrived, late as usual. Anyway, adios, kitty there.
Hi, Jane. Jane, is that you?
Yeah, hi. You're not Henry.
Oh no, my name's André. Henry's been working for me just before COVID and he can't stop talking about you. So finally, I told him that he's got to introduce me to you.
So is he going to be on this call too?
Oh, yeah. He's doing something else right now. So he's just going to join us in a short while, if that's okay.
Yeah, he can take all the time he wants. So what do you do?
I'm in manufacturing.
And what do you manufacture?
Moments. I manufacture moments.
What does that mean? You manufacture moments?
Well, I'll tell you what, take a moment just to gather your thoughts. Just relax and close your eyes and ask yourself, what could Andre possibly mean when he says he manufactures moments? Go on.
What, seriously?
Seriously. Go on, close your eyes. Just let your imagination run wild. Take all the time you want. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and just tell me what you see. What do you see?
I saw my granddad.
And?
Well, Gramps would often not answer my questions right away. Instead, he'd say, "Give me a moment to gather my thoughts." Then, after a bit of silence, he'd respond to my question. Or occasionally he'd say, "I'll have to get back to you on that."
That's interesting.
No, it was so annoying. When I was a kid, I just wanted grown-ups to have all the answers. But now that I took a moment and the memory of my granddad came to me, I realise now that I often react to everything immediately based on how I feel. Perhaps there are times when I could take a moment to gather my thoughts before trusting my feelings.
One
One more.
manufactured moment.
I don't get it.
Well, when you do get it, that'll be another one, won't it?
Okay, you're weird. So, do you make money doing this?
Absolutely. Demand for manufactured moments is going through the roof. That's why I hire people like your friend, Henry. He's amazing. Born natural.
Henry and I are not friends. We're more like professional colleagues who worked together 4 years ago. He was the lead opposite me in a play I wrote and produced.
Ah, I know. Yeah, he can't shut up about your play. And he also can't shut up about you.
Well, that was then and this is now, so I've moved on.
Well, I've been going to the Fringe for the past 35 years. And in 2017, I saw that Truly Madly Deeply in Debt was in the catalogue, the brochure. But I just dismissed it as, just another play about vampires that would only appeal to young people.
Are you an actor? Is that why you go?
Well, I once came with a show the very first time I went there, and I just performed in a youth theatre production. But virtually every year since, I've been back because it just keeps my creative juices flowing. And, it's a lot of fun. So now that Henry told me that your play is about how debt destroys young lives, I'm sorry I didn't go. I think it's probably more relevant to me and my generation than it is to yours.
How so?
Well, isn't your play about how young people start out life in debt, getting an expensive education, and then that doesn't prepare them for a job that pays well enough for them to repay the loans? So if your generation is the victim, isn't my generation the victimizer? Right? So that makes it our problem more than yours, don't you think?
I mean, I wasn't laying blame, I was just describing a problem. I mean, money problems are the greatest stressors on relationships. And why do we have to learn that the hard way?
Well, it's the truth though. We build unrealistic hopes and then we dash them. Oh, I've invited my friend to join us. I hope that's okay.
Well, I mean, it's weird enough already, so what's one more weirdo?
Leonard, Leonard, can you hear us? Is your microphone working? If so, you're on mute. Hang on. Leonard's connecting with a desktop computer that doesn't have a microphone or a camera. He apologises and says that he can hear us fine and he can type, but that's about it. His wife is using their laptop. When she's done, he's going to join us with video. In the meantime, he wants us to continue with our conversation. Okay, we'll just ignore him. So, tell me, Jane, what have you been doing since the play?
Well, I mean, the reviews at the Fringe were amazing. We planned only 7 shows, but we were extended for the rest of the Fringe. I got an agent and things look really good.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, I mean, not so fast. First of all, I had a horrific breakup with a boyfriend. Never fallen so deeply in love with a man. And he gave me a crappy reason as to why he left me. And my agent introduced me to a movie producer who seemed great at first, but turned out to be really dodgy. He said he'd spend £500,000 to make the movie, but didn't want me to perform in it.
Oh, yeah, that's sad.
You were great, my agent said, but you're not a star. Nobody goes to movies that don't have stars. He also wanted to hire a screenwriter to redo the whole thing. In the end, I sold the option to the movie rights for £1,500. I mean, I put more than that on my credit card, bringing the show to the Fringe in the first place.
Ouch. But movies can get a message to more people than a play, don't you think? Oh, what about the option? Has that expired?
Yeah, last year, and I don't think there's any hope.
Oh, okay, that's a pity. Hang on a sec. Leonard's typing something. Leonard says if Jane ever comes up with another idea for a movie, then he'd want first dibs on option in it.
I'll bear that in mind.
Oops. Leonard says he didn't want me to tell you that. Anyway, now you know. Yeah.
Anyway, so my boyfriend dumped me. I dumped my agent and quit the industry, and I haven't looked back. I haven't felt better.
What? So you just gave it all up?
Oh, the whole industry sucks. I mean, sure, it's full of sexual predators. We all know that. But what they didn't tell me is how the whole thing can beat you up. I mean, what a waste of time and money.
What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Nietzsche. He said what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Well, maybe, but is that what matters? Who cares who said it first? Life is not about what other people said in the past, right? The question is, what do you believe right now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I hadn't thought of it before, but I mean, what you could say is that I've done a decade of resilience training, thinking positive.
Who could say it? Me or you? I invite you to say it about yourself.
Okay, correction. I could say I've gone through a decade of resilience training.
You could say it, but will you say it?
Okay. Let me say it. I've gone through a decade of resilience training.
2.
What?
Never mind. So, Jane, since you gave up writing and acting, what have you been doing?
Well, 3 years ago, I moved back home and started working behind the bar at the same pub that I worked at when I was 18.
Okay, and what was that like?
I mean, to be frank, it was amazing. Home felt like coming home, and work felt like coming home too. I'm really, really good at bartending. Better than I ever had been. I mean, I use my acting skills pretty much every day. I play the flirt with a middle-aged businessman and then send him home all hot and he makes love to his wife. Then I play the psychotherapist to a lonely woman and introduce her to other customers that are perhaps too shy to start a conversation with a stranger. And then I play the doting granddaughter to the elderly couple who maybe only see their real grandchildren at special occasions.
So, in the most general terms, what are you doing?
Acting? Wait, no. Let me think. I guess in the most general terms, I don't just give people what they say they want. I give them what I see they need.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah. Let's say Jacob. He was a happy drunk, always hitting on the girls, but like not in a mean sort of way.
Yeah, okay, I know the type.
But there was a certain sadness to it because you could tell that he really wanted a girl. One day I saw my opportunity. After deflecting his advances for about half an hour or so, he looked at me with his sad eyes and said, "How can I make you love me?" I mean, he made it sound like he was joking, but his eyes told me he was serious. Saw my opportunity and I took it.
And so, what did you do?
I poured a pint of his favourite lager and I put it on the bar between us. "Hold both my hands," I said before he grasped the pint, "as if we're lovers." So he took my hands in his and I looked at him in the eyes and imagined he was a lover, my lover. "I can love an alcoholic," I said, "but I can never love an alcoholic who drinks. You have a choice. You have this pint and give up all hope, or admit you're an alcoholic, join AA, and see what happens."
And what happened?
"You are the first person who has ever seen me for who I am," he said. Then he began to cry.
And then what?
I lifted the pint myself and said, "Let me make a toast to love and Jacob." Then I drank the pint. I mean, he didn't say anything. And when I finished, he left and he was still crying. One of his mates said, "Jane, what did you do to poor Obi?" That's what they call him, Obi, even though he hates it. Another regular said, "You might have lost a customer for life. Keep that up and you'll lose your job next." But Frank, the owner, said, "No, losing Jake to AA would be a good thing." Then Frank turned to me and said, "Jane, you're a good woman."
And how did that make you feel?
Great. I mean, it was like receiving a standing ovation. The thing is, I knew Frank was sincere, and more importantly, he was right. I am a good woman. After seeing my play fizzle and the breakup, I really wasn't feeling so great. Everything changed in that moment. I felt like I'd found my calling. I didn't give Jake what he wanted. He wanted me. I gave him what he needed, and he needed to get sober.
And did you ever see Jake again?
Yeah, he came back about 7 months later. He was sober, and he had a girl with him. "I can't love you," he said, "because I found another." Turns out he joined AA and fell in love with Julia, another alcoholic. "We're too different," Jake said. "You need to find someone who has lived similar experiences to you."
Well, that must have made you feel great. I mean, how would you describe what you did?
I might need a moment to think about that.
Yeah, take all the time in the world.
I think the thing is, I can't help but be a playwright. You see, there's this thing in a good story called a defining moment. Everything's moving along or normal like, and then there's this inciting incident that sends everything veering off in another direction. I mean, sometimes also referred to as a call to adventure.
Uh-huh.
So I guess you could say that what makes me special is that I never miss an opportunity to issue a call to adventure. I look for defining moments and I create inciting incidents. I'm a playwright 24/7, and I've never thought of it that way before.
That's two. One for you and one for me.
What do you mean? And what is with that light bulb?
What I meant is that I've never thought of it in literary terms before. You and I are in the same business. We create we create moments with the power to change lives.
Wow. I mean, you've really got to get that light fixed, or at least unplug it.
Yeah, maybe it will. Anyway, may I ask, what are you planning on doing, right now?
Oh, Christ knows. It's driving me crazy. I thought I'd become a therapist, so I applied to half a dozen places to get my credentials. Only one accepted me. It's a new art therapy program. I mean, they haven't graduated anyone yet, so I can't tell if you can even get a job afterwards. But, I mean, their brochure made it sound really nice.
Okay, I can see how you might be good at it.
Maybe, but they don't have any classes on how to do what I do best. I mean, now that COVID restrictions are easing, I've also been asked to come back to the pub. I mean, I could do that, but I just wouldn't feel like I was making any progress.
Okay, what do you mean? Just explain a bit.
I mean, I'm making enough money to move out of the house and still save up for the future. To afford the graduate program, I've got to take out more loans, and I've been there, done that.
Well, what's your deadline for deciding?
The end of the month. I mean, that's when I have to tell the university if I'm going. I mean, Frank says I can come back to the pub anytime I want.
Well, that's good. I mean, will the university let you defer admission? Let you start at a later date?
Um, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I should find out. Anyway, I really, really want to make the decision. I mean, it's driving me crazy. My doctor gave me some pills. I mean, it's the only thing that I can get any sleep.
Well, one thing I do is help clients make decisions. So, if you want, while we wait for Henry to join, I could show you what I teach my clients about decision making. I mean, free of charge, of course.
Sure, why not?
Okay, well, most people mistake worrying for thinking. Well, I mean, technically it is thinking, it is just not very helpful thinking. So they keep repeating questions like, what am I going to do? Over and over, what am I going to do? And no good answers ever come from those questions. So, they can't sleep. Sound familiar?
Yeah, exactly what's going on right now.
Okay, so let's see. The end of the month is 18 days from now. So let's not go down to the wire. So let's imagine that you decide today that 14 days from now, you'll make a decision. Not a day before and not a day after.
Okay, so you mean make my decision a fortnight from now and stop trying to decide now?
Yeah, correct. Can you imagine doing that?
Yeah, I can imagine it, sure.
Good. So now you can imagine you could do it on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high. How confident are you that you can actually resist making a decision until then?
I guess a 5 out of 10. I mean, it's just so stressful that I want to decide right away, but then I know I'll spend the rest of the time worrying whether I've made the right decision.
Okay, that's normal. 5 out of 10 isn't bad. So let's just see if we can get it to a 6 or more. So just invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath now. And now just take a couple more deep breaths. And when you do, just imagine you're in a place that makes you feel good. Just linger there as long as you want and just tell me how you feel.
At peace.
Yeah? And what are you imagining? What do you see?
I'm at the pub, surrounded by friends, and Jacob's there with his girlfriend, and they have a child.
And what can you hear?
Jacob saying thank you.
What else is happening?
I can smell the kitchen. We serve comfort food, and the smell's really comforting.
That's great. So now when you're ready, just open your eyes and relax. You know, anytime you begin to panic about making a decision, you can always go back to that peaceful place. So now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you think you can be that you'll be able to spend, the next 2 weeks exploring possibilities and then make a decision that you can live with?
Pretty good. A 7 at least. Maybe an 8.
Okay, great. You see, when people have to make a decision, they often treat it as if they're driving a car and then somebody cuts in front of them and, they have to react as quickly as possible to avoid an accident. And sometimes that is important, but we all usually have much more time than we think.
Yeah, like my granddad used to say, give me a moment to gather my thoughts. I mean, we just talked about it and I already forgot. What is with that light bulb? I mean, you've got to get it fixed.
Well, sometimes, isn't it what you think of for the first time that counts? Sometimes it's remembering something that you've always known. Now, could I make a suggestion on how to make a decision?
Okay.
Well, when you're thinking about taking a new path in life, it's good to visualize and imagine what success looks like. So see if you can describe success in the present tense using all your senses. Just complete sentences like, I am seeing, I'm hearing, I am feeling, I am saying, either out loud or to yourself, I am smelling, maybe even I am tasting.
Makes sense.
Really enrich it. So going back to the pub is one of your options, okay? And clearly you have a vision, you can sense what a successful bartender come 24/7 playwright is like.
Yeah, but because I've been there.
So now can use those same senses to describe success as an art therapist.
No. All I feel is fear. I mean, the one certain thing is that I'll go back into debt, and that scares me.
Okay. That fear seems rational, and you've learned from experience. However, I asked you to imagine success. You see, you want to determine if the thing that you want is worth the cost. And a good way to get that is to involve others. So think of all the people who could help you figure out what it might be like to be an art therapist.
I don't really know any. I mean, I can't even ask the school to introduce me to graduates from their programme because they don't have any yet.
Well, you don't have to know people in order to involve them. Imagine if you were shopping for an art therapist, okay? How might you possibly find one? And remember, people who have written books can help. Even if a person is dead, their book could be a way of talking to you. Even fictional characters might help.
Really?
Have you ever read How to Be Good by Nick Hornby?
No. Should I?
Well, to be frank, I can't say for sure. It's not actually a how-to book with advice, but it's a pretty good piece of fiction that might get you thinking differently. Hang on a sec. Lenny's typing something. His wife, right. So his wife's freed up the laptop and he's going to be joining us by video.
And what about Henry's? When's he joining?
Well, hang in there. I'm sure he'll join us soon, but I don't know exactly when. But I think you're going to enjoy Lenny. He's not exactly a performer, although I did meet him at a show at the Fringe. It was 2016, and it was about how much bullshit there is in the world. And by a strange set of coincidences, we became friends, but we haven't seen each other for probably nearly 2 years. Yeah, before the pandemic.
Wait, so Lenny is Len Bakerloo. I saw his show in 2016. He inspired me to write Truly, Madly, Deeply in Debt. Can you introduce me?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he'll be here in a second, so tell him yourself. Leonard, hey, it's great to finally see you. So how long's it been? At least 2 years. You look terrible.
Well, you might think I look terrible, but despite the bump on the head and the broken neck, I feel fantastic.
Really?
Yeah, look, you remember how in 2016 when we first met, I would run around trying to save the world. I'd rant against this and rail against that, and I'd write articles, I'd give talks, I'd call out corporate hypocrisy. There was just like so much to do.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, yeah, well, after Trump got elected, he was like this horrible fungus, that burrows into ants' brains and turns them into zombies. And half the country hated him and half loved him, and everybody became obsessed, including me. I was schizophrenic, and our brains shut down, and our emotions took over. It was horrible. I even started paying attention to Twitter. Can you believe it? And that's how bad it got. I became like a retard, and my wife should have put a bullet in my head. It would have put me out of my misery. And then COVID hit, and for a brief second there, I thought there was hope for humanity. I've been saying for decades that humanity needs a common enemy to bring us together, like space aliens, like some creatures that would show up and tell us that the Intergalactic Federation has had a vote, and our planet is infested with us humans, and we've got to get our act together or they will exterminate us. But Mother Nature, she's a genius. I mean, no aliens, just COVID. Brilliant. Just a strand of RNA with no evil intentions, just a basic sex urge, desire to reproduce. And yet with COVID, a single act of selfishness on my part can kill a dozen people halfway around the world 2 weeks from now. And if I want to be kind to others, all I have to do is wear a mask when I go out of the house. And how hard is that? But we had to make that into another way we divide ourselves rather than come together.
Well, it's great to hear and see you. But what's with the neck brace?
Well, I broke my neck in a bike accident, but it turns out that's not actually a big deal. I'm okay and it'll come off soon, but the thing, it made me feel lucky to be alive. It was all the bullshit that was making me feel overwhelmed. But this accident knocked some sense into me. I feel fantastic because I've given up. I'm done. I don't give a shit about all the bullshit. What a relief it's been. I've retired. I'm going to head off into the sunset, preferably on a luxury cruise line. Andre, I'm pushing 70. I just don't have the energy anymore. I don't care about making a difference. I'm just too exhausted for the fight.
Hey, why let it get you down? And you don't need to fight.
Well, that's not how I was raised. I was taught not to complain, but rather fight the good fight. You can't fix everything, but you can work on one thing. And if you try hard all day trying to right one injustice, at least you can go to sleep knowing you did something. But now I feel defeated. I don't feel like I've helped anyone. Ever.
Bullshit. That is total bullshit, using your words. Do you have any idea of how much you have helped me?
No, I don't.
Well, I remember how I went down those stairs into the basement of that pub on the Lothian Road in Edinburgh.
Moriarty's pub.
Moriarty's, right. And that's Sherlock Holmes' nemesis, right? And that was a fitting venue because You build yourself as Len Bakerloo, the world's greatest bullshit detective.
That's right. If you smell something, say something.
Right. And you were ranting and raving about all manner of idiocy and injustice. Politicians, the finance system, the education industry that dumps kids on the job market with loads of debt and the wrong skills.
Yeah, I remember.
And there was this one point where you asked the audience if there were any questions. Well, I counted 28 people that day, and not one person had a question. So I figured out that as a coach, it's my job to ask great questions. So I asked one. Now, I don't remember what the question was, but what I do remember is that you said, good question. We should grab a pint after the show and discuss it.
I remember the pint, but I don't remember your question.
Well, what I remember is that you showed me this deck of cards, okay, with questions on them. And they were amazing. And you said you'd like to give me a fresh deck of cards to keep. But I had to meet you a couple of days later. And I remember your show was on a Tuesday, and I met you 2 days later on the Thursday on the high street. And it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. Do you remember?
You have a really good memory.
Okay, so you were doing this walking tour and recruiting people for the Secrets of the Fringe or something like that. And you started on the high street, and then you walked people to Moriarty's, where you did your real show about an hour later. And it was raining. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, well, the thing that really impressed me was that you were handing out free umbrellas.
That's right. It was raining, and I stopped at this pound store to buy these umbrellas, and they were only a pound. So I figured I'd get 20 of them and just give them away to people on the walking tour.
And that was amazing. I mean, who does that?
I do. I mean, the cost of coming to Edinburgh, for my wife and me, renting a room and the airfare and all of that, it was costing me about 20 pounds per person who came to the show. So why not make it 21 pounds a person?
Okay, yeah, and you were performing as part of the free fringe. So performers don't charge admission on the way in, but then they pass the bucket on the way out. The joke is it's free to get in, but it's not free to get out. But you didn't pass the bucket. You said that life had been good to you and that everything you were doing was an act of paying it forward.
That's right. I mean, I owe a tremendous amount to people who loved me, who didn't have to, and to the simple kindness of strangers.
And I thought to myself, wow, what a great guy. You went beyond the free fringe. You invented the free gift fringe. And you were giving things away and asking for nothing in return.
Well, people were giving me their time. And my dad taught me you should not judge people by how much they have, but how they got it and what they do with it. If you don't have what you need, then you're poor. Right? And if you have what you need, then you're well off. And if you have more than you need, then you're wealthy. You can measure wealth by how much you have left over. And my dad said, time is the great equalizer. We each get 24 hours a day, and the truly wealthy have time left over for others. By sharing their time with me, the audience was sharing their wealth with me.
You see, who thinks that way? That's a new way of looking at wealth that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it either until my dad told me.
Well, I mean, at the time I met you, I don't know if you can remember, but I was in a really bad place. I'd hired a bunch of people to build a new business for me. And they kept saying, trust me, trust me. And 2 months before I met you, I discovered that they didn't have nearly the number of clients that they said they did. And the entire team then walked off the job and took what few clients they had with them.
Ouch.
Yeah. And I went from 17 people in the team down to 4. I mean, I had to take out a second mortgage on my house just so I could pay them.
Yeah, then what?
Well, when that bomb dropped, I involved others. And I reached out to a mentor, that I'd had about 20 years ago. And I asked him what to do, and he said, look, I don't know exactly, but what I do know is that you shouldn't make any big strategic decisions for the next 3 months. And his advice to me was just like I gave you, Jane. Give yourself time to think and then consider possibilities, as well as the risks and the implications.
Oh, Jane, shoot, I've been so rude here. I've been talking about how I feel, and I've been ignoring you. So, hello, and thanks for joining us.
Hi. Leonard, I am sorry to hear that you're feeling down on yourself. You should know that I actually attended your Cut the Bullshit show back in 2016, and it really resonated with me. I'd had years of schooling and private coaching and playwriting and acting, and pretty much the only thing I had to show for it was debt up to the eyeballs.
Yeah, I was listening to you talk to Andre.
Well, it's because of you that I decided to write that play, Truly, Madly, Deeply in Debt. It was a peak experience for me.
Well, thanks for the compliment, but it sounds like I didn't do you a favor. I mean, like it didn't work out.
Well, no regrets. Well, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. I mean, perhaps I got something out of my system that I needed to get out before moving on. I mean, anyway, now I see what I did wrong.
Yeah, how so?
I called attention to a problem, but I didn't give any clues as to how to solve it. People didn't come out of my show with a call to action. I think I just depressed them. And that's not how I felt coming out of your show. I came out of your show angry. I was energized, not depressed.
Yeah, here in the States, I'm often invited by colleges and seldom invited back because I talk to these kids and I ask them, why are you in college? And they'll bat the question around for a while. And then invariably somebody will say, I'm here to find my bliss, or I want to find my passion. And I'll say, you know what? I think I saw that same TED talk and it sounds really good, but could you define passion? And they'll bat that around for a little while longer. And then somebody will say, well, passion is where you don't have to motivate yourself to get up in the morning, right? If you have a job like that, you're passionate. And I said, that's funny because where I came from, we just called that liking a job. That's liking something, right? What I've noticed about passionate people is that sometimes they do the work even when they hate every second doing it. And that's because even though there might be something they hate about their work, they're working on solving a problem they hate even more. I tell these students that if you can't find something to love, then find something you hate and put your energies into doing something about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I felt coming out after hearing your rant at Moriarty's.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you made me feel like there was a lot I could do to make the world better. I mean, my whole business and everything I teach is based on that. But for a little while there, I wasn't feeling it. And it was after your show that I thought I'd set myself a big ambitious goal for creating 1 billion light bulb moments by the time I turned 60 in 2023. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. You invited me to spend time with you after the Fringe.
No, actually, I think you invited yourself.
Really?
Yeah, you invited yourself. Well, that's what it felt like. I mean, I think you wanted me to stay in Edinburgh, but I needed to go home. So you said you'd come to my house. And, you had a few free days after the Fringe. I think you were going to go to Brussels or somewhere to call out some big hotel chain for them not living up to their rhetoric in their mission statement.
Yeah, that's right. I was visiting this huge family-owned hotel group that had impressed me so much in their rhetoric. They had a mission statement that starts out, we have a clear and noble purpose. And it talked about positively influencing the lives of their guests and helping their employees grow and realize their potential, right? And put the investors last. In other words, they came last. And I thought that was wonderful. And I've stayed at their hotels. You would recognize the name, and the service was okay, but it wasn't changing my life. And when I talked to the employees, nobody even knew they had that mission statement.
So what came of it?
Well, interestingly, I visited senior management in Brussels, and they agreed their mission statement didn't really mean anything. The hotel group got sold to a huge Chinese conglomerate that was over leveraged, and they got in trouble, and they turned around and sold it to the Chinese Communist Party. So now, instead of, when you stay at that hotel, instead of, if profits, whatever's left over, if there is anything, going to a family that wants to change, impact your life, and empower their employees, instead the profits go to the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it hardly makes me want to stay at their hotels if that's where the money goes.
Well, anyway, back to what I was saying. I wanted you to help me design my own deck of cards as a tool to teach my methodology. And you came to my house, and one thing that we did that weekend was you talked me down from my 1 billion light bulb moment goal.
Yeah, and I remember you designed those deck of cards, and I keep them and use them. But I remember you said 1 billion light bulb moments. I said, look, this is like an Austin Powers moment here. 1 billion is a lot, so I figure 1 in 8 humans was too much. Maybe 1 in 80. So I got you down to 100 million.
And you said, get the first 100 million, and they will get the next 900 million.
Wait, so what is a light bulb moment?
A light bulb moment. Well, I define a light bulb moment as one of 3 things that happens in the head. It's either a moment of clarity where you absolutely know what you want, or it's a valuable new idea, or it can be a sudden realization.
Okay, so those are the moments that you manufacture, light bulb moments.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you remembered your grandfather, and you decided that perhaps there are times when it's best to take time to gather your thoughts before reacting. Now, that wasn't a new idea, was it? It's as old as ever. But it was a sudden realization for you, a light bulb moment. That was number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot about that already, but there were more, weren't there?
Well, then there was the realization that for the last decade, it wasn't a total waste, but rather more like a decade of resilience training, you said. Now, that's a moment of clarity, okay? Nietzsche wasn't just talking, he was talking to you.
Yeah, I remember. And then there was that thing about me defining moments, issuing calls to adventure. The bulb flashed twice then.
Correct. Because I hadn't thought of my own work in the same way. You know, you and I, both in the same business, kind of, creating moments. That was a moment for both of us.
Leonard, that's what you did for me. You created a moment. After your rant at the Fringe, you asked the audience if they had any questions. I said, you really spoke to me because I felt like I'd been sold a dream and I was drowning in debt. I mean, do you remember what you said?
No, I don't. What did I say?
You said, that's not a question, it's a statement. You looked kind of annoyed, and then you said, so why didn't you do something about it? I said, what can I do? Then you said, what can you do?
That sounds like me.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite forward, but when I asked myself, what can I do? I started thinking about writing a play. So that's what I did.
Now I remember, you didn't invite yourself exactly. I asked you, how might I possibly create a deck of cards with my questions? And you said, well, why don't we get together after the Fringe and work on it? So you've got this way of saying, why don't you? Or why don't we? And it's, you know, it's quite powerful. It's not exactly an order, but more like an invitation that's hard to refuse.
Yeah, I remember reading an interview with this writing teacher. I think it was Bill Zinsser. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He said it was near the end of his life, and he was asked what his life was all about. And he says, I spend my life giving people permission to be the person they were always meant to be. He said, people ask me, why don't I do X? So this teacher would just turn around to him and say, why don't you do X? And then they would do X. And later the students would tell him how inspiring he was. And he said, it's crazy. All I did was repeat their question back to them.
Interesting. It's all about asking the right questions at the right time to the right person.
So, Andre, how close are you to your goal of 100 million light bulb moments?
Well, I mean, it's been 5 years since I decided on the goal, and I've only got 2 years left. So, to be frank, I am behind schedule.
Okay, but how many so far exactly?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot.
You know, you're the one who would tell me how important it is that our goals be specific and measurable. So didn't you keep track?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, I planned to capture specific moments, just like I did with Jane, but it soon occurred that it would be impossible to count all the way up to my goal, such a big number. How was I going to count up to 100 million? It's impossible. And so, if maybe I taught 100 people how to teach 100 people how to manufacture light bulb moments, then I'd have 10,000 facilitators. If each of them taught 100 more, then that would be a million. And each of those million had 100 light bulb moments, then I'd achieve my goal. Anyway, I was just figuring all of this out when the pandemic hit. So, I had to pivot my business. I had to get all my training online, and it took up all my energy. And so the project went on the back burner for a bit. And, there's still hope. But, it's a numbers game.
Okay, what do you mean by a numbers game?
Well, a numbers game. If you kiss 20 people, maybe you'll find one that wants to marry you.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game.
If you want to find a prince, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs. The problem, of course, is that men aren't frogs. They're toads. They taste bad and they give you warts. I mean, you can't make a prince out of a toad no matter how many you kiss.
I mean, what I mean is, how do I know if one of those people that I've manufactured a moment for hasn't gone off and created a million or 100 million without me knowing it?
How do I know that my play didn't make a damn bit of difference? I just know. I mean, that producer said he wouldn't make my play into a movie unless he was absolutely convinced it would be a hit. I said it was worth doing, even if it only changed the life of one person. He said he didn't give a fuck about that. He needed 1 million people to pay to see it just to break even. If 1 in a million changes their life as a result, that's how you get that one person you actually touch. That's what he told me. If you want 100 million people to have a light bulb moment, Andre, then create a viral video explaining how to have one. If 1 billion people watch it, then perhaps 1 in 10 will have a moment. The other 9 will just be wasting their time. That's what social media is good for.
Yeah, that's right. TED Talks, they say it's about ideas worth spreading. Yeah, right. I'd be surprised if 1 in 1,000 viewers acts on an idea they see on a TED Talk. The other 999 recommend it to their friends to make them see so that their friends think they're with it, right? I once interviewed this best-selling author. I mean, he had 3 books and TED Talks to go with each of them. And each talk was viewed by over 1 million people. So I asked him, had he ever been contacted by anyone who'd read his book or watched the TED Talk that inspired them to do anything differently? And he said, not one single person. TED's just high-class entertainment for the college educated, he said. People don't want to make a difference. They want to be impressive at cocktail parties.
Hang on a sec. I've got a message from Henry here. He's going to be with us in a second. Jane, he says it's been a long time since he's seen you.
Yeah, well, maybe not long enough. I'm really not sure how much time I've got left for Henry on this call.
I sense things are a little frosty between you.
Well, there's been a lot of water under the bridge.
Well, when you talk to him today, I just hope you'll just take a moment just to gather your thoughts before you pass judgment. Henry's a good guy. He's one of the best in my team. And, like you, he's got a knack for giving people what they need, even if at first it perhaps isn't what they think that they want.
If that's true, then he's a new man.
Well, he might not be the man you remember.
Hope so.
Well, do you think you can give him a chance?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10 then.
A 0.
Okay, so perhaps I didn't phrase my question correctly. I'm asking you how confident you are that you can give him a chance, not how confident that you'll change your opinion of him. In other words, this is about being, how open-minded you could be, right? It's not about him.
Okay. A 7. I mean, I'll just treat him like every other random jerk that comes into my pub. I always hear them out, and I've yet to find a person who wasn't basically good at some level.
Okay, well, I mean, that's right. I mean, usually we cut people off because we're anxious. But if we can just be curious instead, it works out better. It turns out you can't be curious and anxious at the same time. It's a bit of neuroscience.
I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, when someone in the bar is making me feel uncomfortable, I try to find out as much as possible about the person. I enjoy finding out about people. I mean, it relaxes me. My secret profession, well, secret apart from me, obviously, is that I'm a private investigator, a detective.
Okay, that's the spirit. I think that you just told me it's a 10 out of 10 because being curious is one thing that you're really good at.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Henry. I'll tell you what, Henry. Leonard's here, and I'd just like to catch up with him some more. So here's a suggestion for you. What about if you and Jane spent some time together and go off into a separate room, and then actually, if you could come back for a moment, because I'd like to say a proper goodbye to Jane.
Yeah. Okay, follow me.
Great. You know what, Leonard? Jane has got a point about if 1 billion people see something, then maybe 100 million will have a moment. I'm happy with what I've accomplished with my business since we met in 2016. And, sure, COVID put a spanner into the works somewhat, but, I managed to keep everyone employed. And we put a lot of time, a lot of effort into creating products that, we can deliver over the internet now. And that's really paying off. Before, we mostly sold our time. But now we've got video programs and content that people can just sign up for that helps them, and it doesn't take a lot of additional time on our part.
Yeah, I can't say I'm unhappy either. COVID hasn't been bad for me or my loved ones. My wife and I have spent a lot of time together without an agenda. We've discovered simple pleasures again, cooking a meal, going for a walk. I like a half cup of coffee at the end of the day, but I make a whole pot and I've just let it sit overnight. And then I like getting up in the morning and having a cup of cold coffee that's been waiting for me all night, still there for me to drink in the morning. And there's no dead cockroach in it, which is what happened when I lived in New York City. And, I've joined a book club and I'm rereading Charlton Heston's autobiography. It's been 40 years since I read that. It's the simple, boring pleasures of suburban life. I tell people it's almost romantic.
Almost romantic?
Yeah, I mean, I've been married for more than 3 decades, and romance is a bit much to ask for. Besides, romance is overrated. The important thing long term is companionship. I never asked you about your history. What's your story? How did you get to be where you are today?
Well, at school, I always thought I wanted to get into finance, because that seemed, how to make the most money. But Whilst many of my mates went to university, I didn't. I decided to take a job at a bank, a retail bank, right just straight after school. And what I noticed was in the bank, when the bank hired university graduates, they had to start at the bottom. And I figured out that in a few years on the job, I'd be ahead of them by the time they graduate. And, you know, I feel for Jane because I never had any debt for my education.
Did you like the job at the bank?
Yeah, it was okay, but there was one defining moment, and it was one lunchtime, and I was serving this old lady at the inquiry counter, and so I went up in my usual way and said, hello there, how can I help you? Hello there, she said. Is that how you address people? Hello there. Do you know who I am? I didn't know to speak to your manager. Well, it turns out that she was some sort of lady mayoress and one of the wealthiest customers at the bank. And my manager, well, he didn't exactly read the riot act to me, but he did tell me that I had to be careful of how I treat the most important customers. And
So was that disturbing?
well, not really. I mean, I don't mind treating people the way they want to be treated, but it was more a couple of days later when the same week I saw this woman come out of my boss's office and she was crying, really terrible, really, really distraught.
What was wrong?
Well, I asked my boss, and he said, she was very matter of fact. He was. He goes, look, she's a single mom. She's lost her job. She needed a loan to tie her over so she could pay her rent. We've got to turn her down because she's not a good credit risk. And that is when I started to dislike my job. Because, we had to treat the richest woman in town with kid gloves whilst turning down a genuine person in desperate need. And
So
it just didn't seem right.
what did you do?
Well, I left the bank and I got a job training long-term unemployed people with disabilities on how to find work. And I specialised in helping deaf people. I found some research that said deaf people were 18% more productive in certain roles. Things like data entry and working on production lines. And it's because, they're not distracted. So I used to just call up employers and say I had these great candidates that were 18% more productive. I didn't say they were deaf. I just told the employers that they would have to test them out and see that for themselves. And they believed me. So I would put them in my car and I would actually drive them to their interviews. And they were more productive. And soon I had the best placement rate in the whole of the UK. And I got all sorts of interest from all sorts of people. And they came to study what I was doing. And they even wanted to make a film.
They made a film? That must have made you feel great.
Well, actually, they didn't make the film. And I got in trouble. And it turns out that I wasn't supposed to drive people to interviews in my car without proper insurance and authorization. But the biggest problem was that I was supposed to file paperwork first listing every job. And then I should have had my candidates apply and compete with everybody else. But instead, I was just asking employers, how many people do you want? And I would drive them over. No job descriptions, quick interview. They got the right people. I was helping them, and they could just see how amazingly productive they were.
Okay, so what's wrong with that?
Well, ironically, I wasn't allowing equal opportunities for people without disabilities. So by preventing jobs from being advertised, it meant that the government statistics weren't being properly recorded.
Okay, so you got in trouble because you were giving long-term unemployed people with disabilities an advantage.
A hidden advantage, yeah, pretty much so. Anyway, I left there for another job in management training and development, and I developed a lot of expertise in change management, particularly specialising in helping people and teams adjust mentally and think differently during uncertainty and restructuring.
So, I have this MBA, and there was this required course called Managing Organizational Behavior taught by this academic who never had to manage anybody. And the thing was, it hurt my brain just thinking about what he was teaching us. They were like all ways of manipulating people. I mean, and the students were worse. It was the school was giving these wannabe managers license to become dicks.
Well, it's funny. I don't have an undergraduate degree. Left school, went straight into my first job. But I do have a master's degree. And it turns out you can do that. It's like skipping grades in primary school. But I didn't know that when I left school.
That's cool.
So, in fact, actually, it was the research that I did for my dissertation that led to the methodology behind my consulting business and all of the books that I've written. So what I do now is I help people identify their strong reason why, a compelling reason why they want to accomplish something, and then help them to define their goals, and then teach them how to investigate and explore possibilities and get a plan of clear priorities, and then help them to think about the head stuff, which of their beliefs are helpful and which are going to hinder their progress. And I teach them about how to think about how to involve others, and whilst taking personal responsibility. And of course, the objective of all this is for them to take action and then measure the results. Better thinking leads to better results, and the better actions. No, sorry, I got that wrong. It's the better thinking leads to better actions, which leads to better results. Thinking, action, results. And the key to better thinking is to ask yourself and others better questions. Better questions means more productive and more purposeful conversations, which ultimately improves people's lives.
I think you have something, because I think psychiatry has got it wrong for the most part, because it's bad thinking that leads to bad actions that lead to terrible results. I met this woman, she's a psychotherapist, and she told me many of her prospective clients, they don't have psychological problems as much as moral and ethical ones. After listening to their complaints for 40 minutes, she would say, now, just to summarize, to be clear, you're cheating on your spouse, you're betraying your business partners, and you're lying to your clients. Now, you want a pill for depression, another for anxiety, and one for insomnia. And you want talk therapy from me to address your self-esteem issues. She was pretty brutal. She said, my diagnosis is that you have the last vestigial remnants of a conscience. And then she'd tell them to do the right thing for a change and see how that goes.
I'm laughing. I remember that story from your Cut the Bullshit show at the Fringe.
When I left home for college, my dad said, don't be evil. You don't need to make me proud of you. Just don't make me ashamed.
That's a lot of don'ts.
Well, actually, I see the wisdom. My parents wanted me to do anything. They didn't tell me what I should do. They just said, don't be evil. What they cared about was my character more than my career. And at college, I liked mathematics and computers, and later I worked as a programmer. Before taking a job, I'd simply ask, is it illegal, immoral, or unethical? And if not, it was just a matter of whether I was competent and whether I would enjoy doing it. Being able to pay my own way, doing work that I enjoyed, that was good enough in the beginning. Mostly I was interested in getting girls to pay attention to me. Maybe I shouldn't say this.
Very well.
But I absolutely loved Jane. If she'd been around in my life when I was her age, I would have fallen for her so hard. She's such a good person, and she brings energy. I don't know. She makes half of me feel like I don't want to retire. You don't meet people like her in old age homes and on cruise ships.
Yeah, I think she's great. It's just not, she's good looking and smart. She is a genuinely good person. She doesn't need to go into debt to get more credentials to land a good job. I think she pretty much has what it takes right now. In a couple of weeks, I could train her up and get her adding great value to some of my clients.
So what would that training cost her?
Nothing. You know, I'd do it as a favour. You know, as long as she paid it forward.
Well, I just wanted to say that about Jane. I mean, she would have made an awesome executive assistant in my old company, and she could move up pretty fast if that's what she wanted. Anyway, getting back to ancient history, there's this one thing that happened, a light bulb moment, if you will. It came while watching a movie.
What? Interesting. What, a light bulb moment from a movie?
Yeah, lots of moments actually. My girlfriend and I were there on opening night. It was called My Dinner with André, and it's essentially two men talking for a couple of hours.
I've got to say that sounds incredibly boring. Well, of course, it couldn't be boring if one of the guys was named Andre.
Well, it wasn't boring at all. Neither of them were boring. And these two guys, see, Wally, he's a playwright and down on his luck actor, and Andre, this older guy that he hasn't seen for a while, who's been sort of midlife crisis that's lasted a decade. Although it's just a couple of people talking at a restaurant, they take such vivid pictures with their words that you can imagine exactly what they're talking about.
Well, you know, that takes a lot of skill.
Yeah, the movie was a sleeper. You know, eventually it won lots of awards, but it was slow to take off. It may have opened in only one theater, and my girlfriend and I were there that very weekend. One scene I remember in particular was where Andre, and it was at some sort of retreat at a small castle in Poland or somewhere, and a bunch of the other actors, they had to spend a week or maybe a month together, and there was this director, I think the only instruction that he gave them was that they had to act a part 24/7. But and you know how actors are taught that when playing a king, they should want what kings want, and they should say what kings say, and they should do what kings do, and they should really get into the role and be a king 24/7 in the dressing room and at home with the family. And the thing is, in this place in Poland, the part they had to play was themselves. And instead of asking, what would a king want? They had to ask, what do I want? What do I think? What do I do? And Andre said that as an actor, it was so disconcerting. He'd never thought of himself as having a role he had to play.
Well, I think it's fascinating just to examine whether the roles that we actually play and the roles that other people want us to play are aligned.
Yeah, that's right. And often, if you all think about it, there's some other role that nobody's thought of yet that's even better for everybody. Anyway, it was after that movie, My Dinner with Andre, that I started asking myself, who am I and who do I want to be? Before then, if I was thinking at all, I was thinking about what I want and what I want to have. So after that movie, I began thinking about my character. And rather than try to get things I wanted by doing things to get me there, instead, I just thought about who I wanted to be so that I'd do what that person would do. And eventually, I'd discover what that kind of person gets from life, right? So I started to look at life like an adventure where I didn't have to know what was going to happen next or what I was going to get. I just had to be the best version of myself that I could be. Now, I don't mean living up to my potential. That's things teachers would say when I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do. No, I just meant being a good person, or at least not being evil.
So then what happened?
Well, you know, the craziest thing. First of all, my girlfriend and I lived on East 19th Street in Manhattan, just south of Gramercy Park. And a couple of days after seeing My Dinner with Andre, we were having dinner at this little restaurant on 18th Street, just west of Irving Place. And I don't remember, but it was what it was called, but we ate there often. But this one time, just minutes after we were seated, Andre Gregor and Wally Shawn, the two actors in the movie, they were seated at the table right next to us. And of course, my girlfriend and I pretended to be paying attention to each other, but we weren't. We were mostly trying to overhear their conversation. And they were continuing the conversation they had in the movie. It was eerie, but it was so cool. I mean, you have no idea.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. And the thing is, back in the early 80s, New York was completely dysfunctional. I mean, there was filth and graffiti and crime. And my girlfriend and I and everybody we knew constantly about how we needed to leave the city, but we never did. Someone, I forget who, had this theory that the city was the new model for the concentration camp, where the camp was built by the inmates themselves. And the inmates were the guards, and they have this pride in this thing that they built. And they built their own prison. And so they exist in the state of schizophrenia where they're both guards and prisoners. But after seeing Andre and Wally in that restaurant next to us, my girlfriend said to me, New York is a concentration camp, but it concentrates people, and not in a bad way. No, that's not it. We can't leave, because where else would we have had the experience we just had?
So, okay, I'm going to have a look at this movie. Do you know, can you get it on demand?
Oh, yeah. My Dinner with Andre, it's on demand, and I've seen it many times, like with Eve at the beginning of the pandemic. Anyway, my girlfriend and I started to have intense conversations, just like in the movie. Her philosophy was kind of like Wally's. She liked simple pleasures. And on the other hand, I felt like I had a low-grade existential crisis my whole life.
How so?
Well, my dad said he didn't want me to be evil, but what exactly does it mean to be evil? Often people who are evil do things, and they think they're good people, even though their actions are evil. So I discovered that the Naval Academy at Annapolis here in the States had this honor code, which is a midshipman shall not lie, cheat, or steal. That seems like a no-brainer. I could adopt their honor code as my own. But then I discovered that West Point had a different honor code, which was a cadet shall not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do.
So the Navy tolerates liars, cheaters, and thieves, whereas the Army won't put up with them.
Right, precisely. That's what I was thinking. And it made me think, there's so many instances where I saw things that were happening and I didn't say anything, like in school. There's cheating going on in school and nobody turns anybody in.
Yeah, but nobody likes to snitch, do they?
No, well, okay, but tolerating criminals makes you a complicit, doesn't it? Anyway, I was tested soon enough. You see, the movie came out in October of '81, I remember, and in December of the very same year, my boss, told me he wanted me to deliver some software to a client so he could get paid. At the time, I was a programmer at a small company. But it doesn't work right, I said. It won't be ready for months. And he said, you know that, and I know that, but they don't know it. I need to get paid just to make payroll. Do it. If you order me to do that, I said, I'll resign. Resignation accepted, he said. And that's how I lost my job.
Wow. I mean, couldn't you have negotiated something with him?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what my girlfriend said. But that's what I probably would have done before seeing My Dinner with Andre. It got me thinking. But how do you negotiate with a liar?
So, a light bulb moment movie. And just two people talking, just like you and me right now.
That's right. It really got me thinking about things. And when my boss told me to lie, my reaction was immediate. I didn't even think about it because I'd already done my thinking. All I needed. I had what I call pre-thunk thoughts. I think pre-thinking things is very important. That's because often all of the most consequential decisions we make are not part of an intricate plan we make, but they happen at the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and I didn't plan on having a group of untrustworthy people let down the rest of the team.
Right, and you didn't plan on having a woman cry when she was turned down for a loan.
I was thinking, where was this going? If I got my boss's job doing what he had to do, I just wouldn't be consistent with the person I wanted to be. So anyway, after you lost your job, what happens next?
Well, there was a pretty big recession in 1982. Without me on the payroll, my boss didn't have to deliver the software early to make payroll, so that was good. But I was unemployed for 5 months or so. Employers didn't want to put anyone new on the payroll, although they were willing to hire consultants. So I was running out of money pretty rapidly. So I attended a conference on how to start your own consulting business. And I remember it was on the morning of May 6, 1982, in a hotel room in Washington, D.C., our first speaker of the day said, "Never, ever in the history of human endeavor has there been a shortage of work. And when the money dries up, the work piles up." His advice was that instead of looking for paying jobs exclusively, we should look for work that needs to be done and just do it, even if it didn't pay anything. It was a light bulb moment.
So, did you find work?
Oh, yeah. I wrote to everyone I know, and 220 letters. And in those days, I had a Selectric typewriter, and I typed those letters up by hand. And I wrote to all these people, and I told them I was unemployed and I was looking for work. And even if they had no money, I would work for free. And lots of people wrote with volunteer opportunities or help, asking, they wanted me to help them in their job search or whatever. But someone I knew at Morgan Stanley said they would pay me $25 an hour for 2 weeks to write a user's manual for some software they had. And so I pivoted into finance. After finishing the manual, they offered me a job as a programmer. And I worked there for a while. I reported to this woman named Kara, and she seemed young, but she was super bright and a great manager, and we'd meet every day at 5 o'clock, and she'd give me her marching orders. And one day I asked her if we could meet at 8 in the morning so that I didn't have to remember overnight. And she told me she couldn't do that. "I have school in the morning," she said. I thought she was taking, management classes or something, but it turns out she was still in high school. I was 30, and here was this 16-year-old girl whose after-school job was managing me. I mean, Morgan Stanley was it was like a magical place back then. Today, not so much.
So, could you say that you owe everything to that one decision that you made after watching that movie?
No, of course, not everything. Surely a lot to my parents and to luck. But graduate school, not really. I got an MBA, and it set me back in my development. I tell people I took 5 years to get my MBA part-time and 3 years full-time to get over.
Yeah.
We're done.
Okay, how did it go?
Not well.
How so?
Jane will tell you herself, I'm sure.
Jane, you're on mute.
Listen, guys, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but I don't like it.
Jane, we're not playing a game. What's happened?
Oh, you tell me. What's the real reason you guys contacted me? Was it to make me feel bad?
No.
Oh, if you say so. What about you, Henry? Did you contact me to make me feel bad or just to make me feel good?
What?
Oh, don't answer that. I'm not even prepared to believe you.
Okay, can you just share with me what's happened?
No, I don't want to think about it.
Okay, so although your conversation with Henry was private, and you can keep it that way if you want, Henry does work with me, and if he's made some mistakes, and I can help him do better with other clients, then that's my job.
So you see me as a client, do you?
No, I didn't mean it in that way.
Jane, it's okay. Look, please tell André what happened. He has a right to know how badly I can botch things up.
Okay. Here's the thing. He was asking lots of personal questions that frankly aren't any of his business.
Such as?
He starts out by asking how I am. I say, fine, but he wouldn't leave it alone. Then he asks if I'm happy, and I tell him it's personal. How about you, I ask. He says, I'm happy most of the time now, but there's still 1 or 2 things missing.
Henry, is that true?
Pretty much verbatim.
Okay, Jane, just carry on.
Then he says, often it's a good idea to start with what you want. So Jane, what do you want? A car, I said. I've had a driver's license for more than a decade and I've never been able to afford a car. I want a car. I'll buy you a car, Henry said. Get lost, I said. I don't want your charity. If I go back to uni and live on campus or land a good job in the city, having a car won't be a high priority. Anyway, that's not the point. I just want to be able to afford my own car.
Can I just check, Henry, is this how the conversation went?
Yeah, pretty much.
Henry can't read between the lines, so he just keeps pushing. So you want to be able to afford a car, he said. And my own apartment. So he writes both these things down on a piece of paper or something. Those sound like perfectly good things to want, he said. Anything else? And I want a husband to love me, maybe even children. I was angry. I mean, I'm not even sure I meant it. He says, and you want a husband to love you, maybe have children with. That's perfectly reasonable. He wrote that down too. Anything else? Respect. I was furious. I want people to respect me. I want you to respect me. Excellent. Anything else? Nope. That's pretty much it. Good. So you wrote that down too. So to recap then, you want to be able to afford a car and your own apartment. You want a husband who loves you, maybe have children with, and you want respect. So those are your top 3. Now let's prioritise them. Which do you want the most? Look, I definitely want to be able to afford my own apartment and stuff. I was kidding about the husband. I mean, I don't even have a boyfriend, which I can tell you is such a relief. You're all such children. The thing I want most is respect. And I don't feel like you're respecting my privacy. I don't want to continue with this conversation.
Okay, yeah. And then what happened?
Then Henry says, right, so respect is number 1, affording your own stuff is number 2, and I'll put a loving husband down as a possible number 3. You see, he just kept going and just wanted him to shut the fuck up.
So Henry, why didn't you stop if she didn't want you to continue?
To be frank, I don't know if I can say.
Okay, Jane, please carry on.
Then he says, well, those sound like good things to want. So what's the problem? At that point, I got furious. What do you mean, what's the problem? I don't have what I want. That's the problem. I don't get respect from anyone. I can't afford what I want, and nobody loves me. Now, can we change the subject? Sure, he said. Oh, but he keeps going. Those aren't problems. Those are complaints. Problems are not statements like, nobody loves me. That's a complaint. A problem takes the form of a question that can possibly have an answer. So what can I possibly do to get a pony? That's a problem. What can I do to get a unicorn? Not a problem. Unicorns don't exist. Like I said, how can I possibly get someone to love me? I was so angry, I couldn't even see straight. Correct, he said, all calm like. And how can I possibly earn people's respect? And even, what can I possibly do to get the money to afford the things I want?
Okay, and so this was making you feel angry.
Yeah! I mean, the way he put the questions just made it sound like getting what you want's easy when it feels impossible. He doesn't know what it's like to be me. He just keeps going. It gets worse. Sometimes it's good to take stock of your current situation before making any changes. Sometimes we have thoughts that don't help us. André called these hindering beliefs. Like what? I asked. So what if it's possible that lots of people admire you greatly and you don't even know it? Your parents, for example, do they admire you? I said, well, they say they do, but they would say that. I mean, they're always encouraging me, but, you know, what do you expect from parents? I don't believe them.
Is that what you told Henry?
Yeah, I told him that. He said this is called discounting the positive. He said rather than assume my parents are lying, I might consider assuming that they're telling the truth for a while and, you know, see how it goes. Then he said that everyone who worked on the play I wrote had great admiration for me. I mean, that I had to agree with. Nobody was getting paid for anything and, you know, they were all really into it. But I don't live in the past, told Henry. That was then, this is now, I live in the present and I've gotten over it. Then do you know what he had the gall to say? What if there was a man who had secretly loved you for years? What if he just couldn't bring himself to tell you? How would that make you feel? I mean, hypothetically. Of course, hypothetically, it would depend on whether I loved him too. If I didn't care about him, I mean, it wouldn't bother me. Let him suffer in silence. But if I loved him too, then I'd be furious at him if I ever found out. I mean, what a coward! I don't know if I could ever forgive him for not telling me and just letting me suffer.
And what did Henry say to that?
That's good to know, he said.
And how did that make you feel?
Furious! This conversation is over, I said, and then we ended it and we came back here.
Okay. Henry, what about you? How did that make you feel?
Sad.
For what reason?
Because I've been truly, madly, and deeply in love with Jane from the very first day I auditioned to be in their play.
Oh, bullshit! Leonard Bakerloo, are you listening to this? You bill yourself as the world's greatest bullshit detective, and this is a load of bullshit. Why are you not saying anything?
Well, I haven't heard enough evidence yet. Henry, what made you fall in love with Jane?
Well, in Jane's play, my character, Donald, falls in love with her character, Janet. She crafted every scene and every line of dialogue to make it inevitable that they'd fall for each other. And I'm a method actor, so that means from the beginning, I asked myself, what would it feel like to fall in love with this woman? And when I found the right feeling, I went with it.
That was more bullshit. It was a seduction, plain and simple.
Maybe, but that seduction followed a script. The script that you wrote, Jane. You seduced me. Donald was the perfect lover for Janet. And the thing is, the Janet character was you, Jane. I mean, you aren't a vampire, but everything else about Janet is authentic Jane.
And you were the perfect Donald. I called your character Donald because he was a Don Juan. I typecast you because that's who you were at uni. I mean, you seduced 3 of my girlfriends. No, 4. Actually 4. I learned of just another today. I mean, you're incredible. And that's not in a good way.
Well, that's true. But in your play, Donald changes from being a Don Juan who seduces people into a man who loves you, who wants to give you the love you deserve. I was a good choice for the part, but your play changed me into the kind of person you wanted me to be. I'm not that old person you knew at uni anymore.
You know, when we became lovers, it felt good, but it didn't feel real. And then you broke up. You said, it's not you, it's me. That's what you told all of my girlfriends. Leonard, hear that? Whenever someone says it's not you, it's me, that's bullshit. What they're actually saying is, it is you, but I don't want to talk about it. I just want out.
Yeah, he's right. You don't understand what was happening to me. Before you, I'd break up with a girl if the sex was no good, or the chemistry wasn't right, or after a while she wanted a serious relationship. Yeah, I would leave her, because that's not what I wanted. So technically, it always was me. I never told people to want what I wanted. I just tell them it was me, which it was. But with you, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I wanted us to marry and have kids. I wanted us to grow old together. I had feelings like I'd never had before.
Oh, guys, even more bullshit.
And another thing is that you were my boss. I was sleeping with the boss, and I was afraid people would think that's how I got the part.
Oh, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You probably did seduce me to get the part. And then you kept the romance going just so that my performance would be more authentic. Then you dumped me when the movie deal fell apart. I mean, you're such a bullshitter. Leonard, how come you're not saying anything?
Okay, here's the biggest thing. I was raised in Liverpool to working class parents. Right? My dad told me the role of the man is to be a provider. And he went to work when he was 17. He's never had any debt. And my mum only started working after my younger sister went to school, and even then it was only part-time. But you and I, we were in debt because of a dream. You and I dreamed of becoming famous actors, and Janet and Donald dreamed of being human. How are we ever going to pay off our loans with what we were making as actors? In your play, Donald changed. In real life, I changed too. And just like in your play, it was money problems that doomed our relationship. For the first time in my life, I broke up with someone because I wanted to be serious. Being in debt up to my eyeballs, it meant I couldn't be the provider I was raised to be. It made me feel like I wasn't a real man.
If that's true, you should have told me. I mean, that's an archaic definition of manliness.
Nonetheless, it is what I felt. You never could have convinced me to feel differently. Why should I? Especially now, I'm in the clear. I've got savings in the bank. Telling me I shouldn't want to be a good provider, it's like telling me I shouldn't want to be physically fit. Look, I haven't had a girlfriend since we split up. A day hasn't gone by when I haven't thought about you. There hasn't been a pound that I've put in the bank that I haven't imagined was going into a nest egg for the two of us. And you said you wanted a car. My offer to buy you one was sincere. I feel like half of everything I have belongs to you because it was you who taught me what true love feels like.
You coward. Why did you keep your feelings secret all this time?
Because I was afraid you didn't care about me. That I meant nothing to you.
And why did you feel like you needed to bring this up now?
Because if you never really cared about me, then I'd need to move on.
And did you get the answer you wanted?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
You called me a coward. You've told me what I need to know.
I've got to use the bathroom or something. Don't go.
That's what I love about Jane. When she goes all Latin on me, I know exactly where I stand. Actually reminds me of home. My dad could tell me that he hated me, and I knew it just meant that he was angry, but he still loved me. It's the having to be polite all the time. It drives me absolutely nuts. Look, did I say the wrong thing just now with Jane?
Well, were you telling the truth about how you feel?
Absolutely. There hasn't been a day when I haven't thought about Jane. I've written 10-page love letters and then I've torn them up. I've thought about proposing marriage. I've done a lot of crying. I mean, I've never done that before. Ever. My dad would be ashamed of me. But I don't feel ashamed.
You know, she loves you.
Clearly.
Is there any hope?
Probably.
Well, you know, it isn't certain.
Did I screw it up?
Well, it's perhaps not how I would have done it.
Oh, so I screwed it up, didn't I?
No, look, actually, you did the best thing because what you did was all you. If you'd have done what I would have done, then Jane would have seen a bit of me rather than 100% of you.
What?
How do we know that Jane really went to the bathroom? I mean, she could be just off camera listening to this. Maybe we should just keep quiet.
Okay, so just keep calm. Let's just not say anything until she comes back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Did you hear any of our conversation while you were gone?
Why? Did you say something you were ashamed of?
Ashamed? No. Embarrassed? Yes, but no, not ashamed.
Well, that's for me to judge. Anyway, I've had a thought.
Okay, shoot.
In these next 14 days, before I make my career decision, why don't I write a screenplay?
What, for a movie? Yeah, okay, sure. Well, why don't you do that?
Okay, I will. The thing is, you're all going to be in it.
Okay.
You sure? Because it might not be pretty and you might not like it.
In what way?
So you all have to be in this movie because the movie's going to be about this conversation.
Okay, interesting.
So you're all either going to play yourself, or I'll find someone to play you instead. I mean, either way, we're all in this together.
Well, I'm happy to play myself on one condition.
Yeah?
Yeah, no bullshit. You see, it's fine if it's fiction based on fact, but everything in the play has to be the truth. I don't mean like you can't have fictional situations or dialogue that didn't actually happen that way. It's just that whatever you write has to be about how the world really is and about how we really are. It can't be a piece of propaganda.
I think I can do that.
Believer, everything about Truly Madly Deeply in Debt was truthful in the way that you mean it.
And if I'm going to be in it, the movie has to help people have light bulb moments and improve their world through better thinking.
Well, if it's about this Zoom call, then it will, won't it?
I'm in too on one condition.
Yeah.
If this screenplay ever gets turned into a movie, even the most amateurish one, then I'm only willing to be in it if in the end the boy gets the girl. I mean, for real this time, and like they live happily ever after.
Really? After all this, you want me to crank out a chick flick?
Of course. If the boy is me and the girl is you, then why wouldn't I?
We'll see about that. So anyway, here's what I want. Andre, if I'm not mistaken, you've been recording this entire Zoom call.
Yeah, absolutely. But if one single person doesn't want it retained, then we delete it. That's the policy.
Good. I want you to give it to me. Everything. Even the bits that I didn't get to hear. I'll use it for inspiration. I mean, maybe I can even get away with just editing it down and, we'll have the movie ready made.
Okay, no problem. So does anybody else have an objection?
As long as in the end the boy gets the girl. Otherwise, you can see the video, but you don't have permission to put me or my words in your screenplay.
Well, I have a question.
Yep.
If this movie ends when this conversation ends, I mean, like right now, then how will the audience ever know if the boy gets the girl?
If I'm good for my word, and if the audience gets to see a movie, any movie, no matter how amateurish, then they'll have their answer, won't they?